Poppy Playtime. Sometime I'm hoping to do a full review of this, when the entire game comes out. But I spent time playing 1 and 2. I might as well do a review of them. So, let's start off with Chapter 1. Now, Chapter 1 absolutely tries its best to build this, intrigue and horror, which, honestly, apart from, one major bit, I didn't really buy into. It's only when Huggy Wuggy themselves actually comes out do you actually feel any sense of foreboding stress, and that's because Huggy Wuggy at first comes out and is so much taller than you, and then of course, the big vent chase sequence, they do a very good job at making this thing look dead set on ripping you apart, with this animalistic bloodlust. This thing is very well animated. It does lose a little bit once you realise how scripted everything really is. It's not like Five Nights at Freddy's where everything's like this big hunt down to the death where you have to react quickly or die. This thing is very much, very much planned out. Now don't get me wrong, that doesn't ruin it or anything, but given that it ends up basically being over after that chase, it's a little disappointing. Right as the chapter is really starting to heat up, it's over. That's probably why they made the chapter free. It wasn't originally, and I remember there was a lot of anger when that happened, but, they clearly realized that while there is a scary moment there, they saved that scary moment till the very end, and it's quite short-lived, so I can at least respect them for making that chapter free. Now, Chapter 2, on the other hand, now they absolutely learned from their mistakes because this chapter had a lot more scary moments in it. Of course, you get the introduction to Mummy Longlegs, and let me tell you, Mummy Longlegs, while I don't find her scary, I do find the character far more interesting. The stretchy design, the way that the overly sweet way that she interacts whilst being clearly sinister with her intentions, it honestly makes for a very interesting character. I felt like more could have been done with her, much like I felt the same way with Huggy Wuggy, but at the same time, I don't mind not getting the full taste of her. Sometimes things are better being left up to interpretation and up to your imagination. And it doesn't matter that I didn't find her scary because there was plenty more to come. The first minigame was essentially Simon but with Bunzo Bunny coming from above, and I love Bunzo Bunny too much to be scared of them, but I will say obviously there is an intimidation factor with something coming down ready to kill you as you're desperately looking for the button that you're meant to press. It's short-lived though, and it's definitely the least scary part of the game. Then you get this other part where these mini Wuggies are coming through these pipes, and you gotta look around to try and get them, and my god, I actually had to really crank the brightness up, not because it was scary, although it did get me a bit, because there is this definite fear when I have stuff crawling up behind me in horror games that I cannot see, so, you're starting to really tickle me there, game. You're really starting to get at stuff that makes me uneasy. But it was because I actually couldn't see anything. The default brightness made it so I genuinely couldn't tell where the Wuggies were coming from, so I would just keep losing. Once I cranked the brightness up, it was a lot easier to deal with. But still, even then, the tension as things continue to escalate, with the Wuggies coming up faster and faster, in greater quantities, until the end, it feels like you just barely scraped by. Now, this is what I mean, the Huggy Wuggy chase in the first chapter felt a little too streamlined, whereas this, it feels like you're just barely scraping by when you get away from it. That is what I enjoy. This chapter seemed to really understand a lot more the idea of, just barely getting away from the monster. And then, of course, there's the one with PJ Pugapillar, where you have to move whenever the lights are out or whatever, and then the moment the lights are on, then suddenly you cannot move. And this one is intimidating in its own right, not as much as the Huggy Wuggies, but the fact that, you can sometimes get stuck on something and you're thinking, oh Jesus, PJ Pugapillar's probably right behind me, and, if you can't see PJ Pugapillar, you're worrying, where's PJ Pugapillar? And then if you see PJ Pugapillar, oh god, it's way too close. Again, this is another one which feels like you're barely getting by, and honestly, I love that because, it just, again, builds tension. The part with Mummy Longlegs, again, I didn't find as scary as the rest of it, but, again, the way that it's done, I do find very interesting. Seeing Mummy Longlegs coming at you all these different ways, at one point she even hides, it seems, to try and pounce on you. Like, it's a much more interesting chase than the Huggy Wuggy one, even though it goes by a lot of the same rules. And I think that's because whereas the Huggy Wuggy one feels a lot more like you're just going around in a preset path, it feels like you have to be a bit more aware of your surroundings. You know, you got to look up to use the grab pack, for instance. And of course, seeing Mommy Longlegs, change into this state where she is fully incensed, fully ready to just tear you to pieces, that's a much bigger improvement in my book. Now, of course, they leave the game on a cliffhanger where this metal clawed hand grabs Mommy Longlegs after you kill her, spoiler alert. And while I get that they're trying to build up suspense, my problem for me is, once you start building up suspense of this ultimate evil, my problem is, I'm going to be building this up in my head. I'm going to be like, so curious about what you're trying to build up to me. I'm going to be disappointed. I'm going to be honest with you. The big ultimate reveal is more than likely going to disappoint me, because the problem with a lot of horror games is obviously horror is something that works a lot better if it's something that you cannot see. So right now, if all we can see is a clawed hand, my brain's conjuring up all kinds of horrifying shit. When they do the grand reveal, I don't know if they're going to be able to, live up to that. Still, I'm definitely curious to see the direction the series goes in. I know that Chapter 3 is still in the works at the time of recording, so while I hope to do a full review someday, I will say, while I'm not crazy hyped, like I mentioned there with my concerns for the big evil, I am at least curious to see the direction the series goes in. It seems that they learned a lot of lessons going from Chapter 1 to Chapter 2, so this might be a surprisingly compelling horror redemption arc. A lot of people pointed to this as the beginning of the end for horror games, but maybe there is still some promise here.